There's a photograph that almost no one has seen. It was taken backstage at a film premiere in 1994, and in it, a man who the entire world believed was on top of everything stand alone in a hallway, leaning against a cold concrete wall, his eyes cast down toward the floor. The lights in the corridor are fluorescent and harsh, the kind that strip away all pretense. And in that unguarded moment, you can see something in his face that the cameras on the red carpet never caught. You can see a man who is carrying something enormous, something invisible. What was it? And how did a boy from a small New Jersey town, a boy who never finished high school, who was written off before he even started, become one of the most recognizable faces on the planet, only to watch that recognition curdle into something unrecognizable? And then, after losing the person who was his entire world, after the scandals and the silences and the long, lonely nights in a house that still held the shape of someone who was no longer there, how does a man like that find a reason to keep going? This is not the story Hollywood told you. This is the one they couldn't. John Joseph Travolta was born on February 18, 1954, in Englewood, New Jersey, the youngest of 6 children born to Salvatore and Helen Travolta. Englewood in those years was a blue-collar suburb, the kind of place where the lawns were kept but not manicured, where the fathers came home from work smelling of machine oil and ambition, and where the mothers ran households with a kind of quiet, iron determination that nobody thought to call heroism, but absolutely was. Helen Travolta was exactly that kind of woman. She had been an actress herself, a stage actress, trained and talented, but life had redirected her, as life so often does with women of her generation. She poured everything she might have put on a stage into her children instead. She saw something in her youngest son from very early. Something electric. Something that didn't sit still. John was not a scholar. The schoolrooms of Englewood couldn't hold him the way the stage could. He was restless and kinetic, always performing, always moving, always looking for the audience in any room he entered. He would watch old movies with his mother on Saturday afternoons, the two of them on the couch, the flickering black and white light making shadows on the walls. And he would memorize the gestures, the walks, the way a man could make a whole room lean toward him with nothing more than a look. Helen never told him to stop. She fed it instead. She drove him to auditions. She believed. What his father thought of all this is a more complicated question. Salvatore Travolta was a tire businessman, a practical man, a provider. He was not cold toward his son's dreams, but neither was he the wind beneath John's wings in the way his mother was. There was a gentle, unspoken tension there, the kind that lives between a father who built his life with his hands and a son who wants to build his with something the father cannot quite see or touch. John felt that distance. He carried it. And if you look at the roles he chose throughout his career, the men who hunger for love and recognition, the men who need to be seen, you can feel the echo of that distance in every single one of them. He dropped out of Dwight Morrow High School at 16. 16 years old, no diploma, no plan on paper, just this absolute certainty burning in his chest that he was supposed to be somewhere else. His mother supported the decision. That mattered more than he could say. He moved to New York, then to Los Angeles, began auditioning, began the grinding, humbling process of learning what it actually costs to want the thing you want. He took whatever work came his way. He did commercials. He did regional theater. He took a job in a touring company of Greece, which is one of those details that makes you believe in the strange poetic logic of the universe, because Greece would define his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. And through all of it, he carried with him a small silver ring that his mother had given him before he left New Jersey. A simple thing, but he wore it constantly, a thread back to her, a reminder of who had believed first. But before any of the brightness came, before the spotlights and the screaming fans and the magazine covers, there was a wound, a defining one. In 1975, while John was beginning to taste his first small sips of success, appearing as Vinnie Barbarino on the television series Welcome Back, Cotter, a woman named Diana Hyland, walked into his life. She was older, 12 years older, to be exact, and she was a seasoned actress, warm and luminous, with a depth of spirit that stopped him cold. They fell in love with the urgent, almost reckless abandon of people who recognized something essential in each other. She was his first real love, not a crush, not an infatuation. The real thing that he got the role of Danny in the film version of Grease. He was nominated for an Academy Award for his performance in Saturday Night Fever. His star was exploding, burning brighter and faster than even he had dared to hope. And all of it would have been perfect, or something close to perfect, except that Diana was sick. She had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and in 1977, while John was on the set of a film called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, a film where, with a kind of devastation that staggers you to think about, he played a boy unable to be touched by the world around him. Diana's condition worsened rapidly. He was with her on March 27, 1977, when she died, holding her in his arms in a hospital room in Los Angeles. She was 41 years old. He was 23. He did not talk about it for a long time after. The industry moved fast around him, and the narrative of John Travolta in 1977 was Triumph and Fever and Saturday Night and Dancing Shoes. Nobody wanted to hear about the grief. Nobody asked him to sit with it on camera. So he carried it instead, the way people do when the world refuses to make space for their pain, and it settled somewhere deep inside him and became a part of the architecture of who he was. You can hear it in interviews from that period if you listen carefully, a slight hollowness behind the enthusiasm, a fraction of a second before the smile arrives, where something older and heavier passes across his face. A man learning that fame is not the same as protection, that the lights don't keep the darkness out. And then the darkness came for him in a different way entirely. Through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, John Travolta experienced the kind of Hollywood decline that they don't make glamorous documentaries about, because there is nothing glamorous in it. The career that had burned so incandescently in the late 1970s had dimmed in a way that frightened people around him and confused the industry. The film stopped landing. The roles dried up. The man who had once embodied cool and electricity and the raw pulse of American pop culture became, in the cruel shorthand of the entertainment industry, a cautionary tale. A comeback story waiting for a comeback. His name was spoken in past tense by people who had once spoken it like a prayer, that he was offered the role of Forrest Gump and turned it down. Let that sit for a moment. A man who had already proven he understood the deep, complicated heart of America somehow couldn't see what that role would have done. He made choices that didn't land. Look Who's Talking made money, but it didn't restore the mythological status he'd once had. There were whispers in the industry, the kind of whispers that echo through corridors and die before anyone has to own them, about whether he still had it, whether the thing that had made him electric was gone. He was in his late 30s, which in Hollywood is a dangerous age for men who built their careers on being young and magnetic and impossibly alive. There is something quietly devastating about watching someone famous fail in public. The scrutiny is relentless, but worse than the scrutiny is the indifference. The way the industry simply stops looking at you, the way you can feel yourself becoming invisible in a room designed entirely around visibility. John Travolta felt that. He has said so, in his own careful way, in interviews over the years. And yet there was something in him that didn't break. Something that belonged to that boy his mother had seen. That restless, electric, unkillable thing. And then, in the spring of 1994, a director named Quentin Tarantino handed him a script. The script was called Pulp Fiction. It is almost impossible to overstate what that script did. Not just to his career, to him, to the idea of what he was capable of. The role of Vincent Vega was everything that John Travolta had never been allowed to be on screen: laconic, dangerous, funny in a way that has darkness underneath it, weirdly graceful in a way that is also somehow wrong. Tarantino had fought for him. The studio was skeptical. Nobody in Hollywood in 1994 would have listed John Travolta among the names you build a movie around. But Tarantino had grown up watching Travolta. He had seen the thing the industry had stopped looking for. He found it again. And when John Travolta danced with Uma Thurman in that diner, with Chuck Berry coming through the speakers in his hands, moving through the air in that way that was somehow both ridiculous and perfect. The entire world remembered what they had forgotten. The film premiered at Cannes in May of 1994. It won the Palme d'Or. John Travolta stood on that stage in the south of France, in the Mediterranean light, and what he felt in that moment. This is worth sitting with, was not just professional vindication. It was something older. It was the kid from Englewood, the high school dropout, the boy his mother had believed in, standing in front of the world again, saying, "I am still here. I was always here," and the world received him. The Academy Award nomination came. The magazine covers came. The scripts came flooding back in. He made Get Shorty. He made Michael. He made Face Slash Off with Nicolas Cage. He stood on the summit again, blinking in the light. And this time he knew, in a way he hadn't at 23, how rare that summit is, how fast the weather can change up there. But what no magazine cover told you, what no Hollywood profile captured, was that all of this happened while he was also falling in love in the realest, most lasting way of his life. Her name was Kelly Preston. He had met her in 1987 on the set of a film called The Experts. And from the beginning, there had been something between them that operated at a frequency deeper than attraction. She was beautiful in a way that photographs could capture, but not fully contain, warm and grounded and funny and genuinely curious about the world. They married in 1991, a ceremony in Paris, with the city glowing around them in the September dark. Together they built a life that the tabloids could never quite get a handle on, because it was too private, too real, too specific to be reduced to headlines. They had a son, Jet, a daughter, Ella Blue. The family moved to Ocala, Florida, to a property called Jumbo Lair, where John had landed his own planes because, yes, he was also a licensed pilot, a man who had found in the freedom of flight something that the freedom of performance had always promised and never quite delivered. They built something together that was theirs, private, sacred. And then, on January 2nd, 2009, Jet Travolta died. He was 16 years old. He had suffered a seizure while on vacation in the Bahamas and struck his head. The family had been on holiday, which means that one moment there was a bath, a holiday, the ordinary, extraordinary texture of family life, and then there was nothing. There was Jet, and then there was not Jet. And there is no way to say that without acknowledging that it is one of the most devastating things a human being can experience. And that the version of John Travolta who walked out of that hospital in the Bahamas on January 2nd, 2009, was a fundamentally different man than the one who had walked in. He spoke about it publicly, eventually. He has said that he was not sure he would survive it. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet, literal sense that grief of that magnitude can make the future feel genuinely impossible. The small silver ring his mother had given him decades earlier, the one he had kept for all those years, became something he would touch in moments of unbearable loss. A talisman, a reminder. He wore it through the grief. He wore it through the slow, grueling process of learning to be a man who has lost a child. There is no recovery from that. There is only continuation. There is only the choice, made again every morning, to keep going. His faith, and John Travolta has always been, publicly and without apology, a member of the Church of Scientology, became both a comfort and a complication during this period. He has said that his beliefs helped him understand Jet's death within a framework of meaning. Not everyone would share that framework, and the world was not always kind about it. But it mattered to him. That is what faith is for. Not for the audience's comfort. For the person who needs it in the dark. He and Kelly continued. They had a third child, a son named Benjamin, born in November 2010, which is the kind of detail that staggers you with its beauty and its stubbornness. This couple choosing life again, actively, deliberately, 18 months after the worst thing. They chose more. They chose Benjamin. And if you want to understand who John Travolta is, look at that decision. Look at what it takes to open yourself to love again after the universe has shown you exactly what love costs. Kelly Preston died on July 12, 2020. She had been diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years earlier and had kept it largely private, the way she kept so much of her life private. She was 57 years old. And John Travolta, who had already lost Diana Hyland to cancer more than 40 years before, who had already buried his son, who had already sat in more hospital rooms with more grief than most people will ever know. John Travolta lost his wife, his partner of 30 years. The person who knew him, he announced it on Instagram, with a photograph of the two of them, and the words he wrote were simple and true and completely without performance. Kelly's love and life will always be remembered. The simplicity of it was the most devastating thing. No flirtage, no public relations. Just a man telling the truth about what he had lost in the years since. He has continued working. He has been in films and television projects. He has appeared at events and given interviews and done all the things that a person in his position continues to do. But there is a quality to him now that is different from the John Travolta of Saturday Night Fever or Pulp Fiction or even The Triumphant Year. There is a quality of someone who has been emptied out and refilled repeatedly with something heavier and more complex than ambition. He turns 72 this year. Wait, 71. He turned 71 in February of 2025, and the face you see in photographs now is the face of a man who has been somewhere. Multiple somewheres. The kind of places that leave a mark. He has said in various interviews that he tries to live with gratitude. That sounds like a bumper sticker until you consider the specific weight of what he is choosing to be grateful despite. Grateful despite Jet. Grateful despite Kelly. Grateful despite the years when the industry turned its back and the silence was so loud you could hear your own doubt. Grateful despite Diana Hyland dying in his arms when he was 23 years old and the world just kept moving. That gratitude is not soft. It is not a lifestyle. It is something you have to choose every single day with full knowledge of the cost. And so now you know what that photograph backstage in 1994 was about. It wasn't despair. Or at least, it wasn't only despair. It was a man at the precise hinge point between everything he had been and everything he was about to become, standing in a fluorescent hallway, wearing a ring his mother gave him, carrying the weight of Diana and the silence of the lean years and the knowledge that he had almost been erased, and he was not erased, and the dance in that diner was about to happen, and the world was about to turn toward him again. And he was standing in the hallway because he needed one more moment before he walked back out into the light. Now here's what I want you to sit with, because this story is not really about John Travolta. Not at its deepest level. This story is about what happens to a person when life takes away the thing they thought was permanent. When the person who believed in you first is gone. When the child you made with your body and your love is gone. When the partner you built everything with is gone. And you're still here, standing in a hallway somewhere, wearing a simple ring, deciding whether to walk back out. You have had that hallway. You know you have. Maybe it didn't look like a film premiere backstage in Cannes. Maybe it looked like a kitchen at 2 in the morning, or a hospital parking lot, or the front seat of a car where you sat for 20 minutes because you couldn't make yourself go inside and face whatever was waiting. You have been in that hallway. And the question this story asks of you, the real one, the one that doesn't have a clean answer, is this: when you're standing in yours, when the fluorescent light is harsh and the weight is real and the world on the other side of the door has no idea what you are carrying, what do you reach for? For John Travolta, it was a ring. A simple silver thing his mother pressed into his hand before he left New Jersey. He has carried it through the deaths and the silences and the reinventions and the grief. He is still carrying it, 71 years old, and that boy from Englewood is still somewhere inside him, still restless, still electric, still reaching for the audience in every room he enters. What is the ring for you? What small, steady thing carries the weight of everyone who believed in you before you believe in yourself? Because that is the real inheritance. Not the money, not the fame, not the Palme d'Or. The thing you carry that connects you back to who you were before the world got to you. Go find it. Hold it. And don't let anyone tell you the hallway is the end of the story.